service providers are and for the last few years have been in a state of, okay, what's next? What do we do next? How do we grow? And traditionally that's been, okay, what can we look at our go-to-market? How can we grow from that? What different channels can we do? But I think the impact of new competition coming into the market has really elevated the need and the speed that they are going to have to do this. One of the key conversations we've been having with a number of providers, both large and small, is what's our Microsoft strategy? I think for them, they're really sat there going, okay, Microsoft is coming into this market. When they first launched their proposition through Microsoft Teams using calling plans, for them that was okay, these Microsoft have come in, they really started kicking down our door, taking our customers. Microsoft have pulled back on that now, but that's given an opportunity potentially to the service providers, if they want to work with Microsoft, is using direct routing, working with them, putting in their PBX at the back end of Microsoft Teams to deliver call functionality through that as well. So I think there's a big question for the service providers is, are we a competitor to Microsoft, or do we need to partner with Microsoft to be successful in the future? And one of those conversations, I think, is going to be ongoing. I think people are really interested in that strategy of that. So I think that's the first key one. I think the second big conversation we're having is what other competition are coming into the market? How else are we going to compete with these providers? And for us, it's not the US providers that was a couple of years ago saying how are RingCentral 8x8 going to compete, but it's how a European provider is going to compete with us as well. So the likes of Enreach, Gamma, Destiny, Enfon, all acquiring multinational capabilities and moving into new markets and coming in with funding, with go-to-market experience, and with success. So it's going to be really interesting the next few years how these service providers can react to these changes.
Dom, you mentioned in your talk today 20% of phone systems now deployed in the cloud. How do you see that kind of speeding up at all, or do you see it slowing down?
I think we're definitely starting to see an increase in the rate. It's been interesting. Historically, the market's really been SMB focused, so small businesses under 50 users moving to the cloud, and there has been some mid-market and larger enterprises, but that space has really been dominated by PBX providers and enterprises with complicated communications requirements. What we're seeing now is mid-market enterprises who typically bought from a PBX, that PBX vendor has now moved their strategy is cloud focused. Obviously with the RingCentral and Avaya deal, that's given a massive incentive for all the Avaya partners worldwide to look at what their cloud strategy is. Is it RingCentral, or do they need to bring other people into that? And then Mitel obviously have been really focusing on what they should be doing cloud-wise, splitting apart the two companies, have your on-premise and your cloud side, and then almost working separately under the same brand there. So really interesting to see the PBX vendors, and I think that's going to help drive this market on in the future going forward.
Great. We're hearing a lot about Microsoft, just jumping back to Microsoft again, but they are growing super fast and they're declaring their numbers, which is, I find really interesting, that they're now at 20 million DAU, daily active users, 500,000 organizations using Teams now. How much of that is actual kind of cloud calling, do you think? I mean, is it realistic to think that they are dominating the phone system, the kind of UCaaS market, or is their play predominantly collaboration, do you think?
Microsoft do put out some figures. They also don't put out a lot of figures, which would be really useful for this industry to help understand, are they a competitor? Are we supposed to work with them? What is this market opportunity? How are we going to grow with it? So from my perspective, I think there is, I think under 10% what we're hearing of Teams deployments have got voice attached to them. And we'd say around 95+% of those are delivered through direct routing. So calling plans haven't been a success. I think that's been fairly well documented. But we're not seeing massive numbers of Teams with voice enabled yet, but I think that number is going to increase. A lot of the providers we've spoken to in our upcoming Microsoft report really details how you can work with Microsoft going forward. So really interesting to see on that point. And I think it's definitely something every provider should be looking at, is if we're not working with Microsoft now, what is our relationship with them going forward in the future? Do we want to compete with them? And if so, if we're competing against them, what products do we need in our portfolio to be able to compete against them?
Great, and we're really moving beyond just voice now. Cloud PBX seems to be almost yesterday's conversation. So we're talking UCaaS now, we're talking collaboration in that UC stack. What's the state of the service provider community? Have they got a way to go before, or are you seeing a lot more kind of collaboration tools baked into their solutions?
I think everyone's realizing they need to do something now. I think the cloud PBX is a great proposition. It's obviously growing well, but the demands of the enterprise are definitely evolving. With the growth of remote working, the growth of enterprises want to drive better engagement with their customers, means they're looking for technology that's going to really enable this. The cloud PBX, as what we would term that, isn't going to solve those problems. So you need to look at what you're bringing in terms of collaboration. And collaboration isn't just team collaboration. It could be productivity tools. It could be video conferencing. It could be a whole different suite. And every different enterprise is going to have a different collaboration requirement for them going forward. So I think as a service provider, you've got to look at what's in my portfolio at the moment. Is it okay just to sell a cloud PBX, or do I need to look at what other services are going to wrap around that, and how are we going to sell that? How are we going to take that to market? How are we going to train our sales team to sell this to the enterprise as well? I think it's going to be really important, because the enterprise, I think, it understands that they're moving to the cloud. It understands that they need to look at what they're doing in terms of a digital transformation journey, and that's going to be from multiple different vendors, I think, because unless you are offering this as a service provider and you're doing the integration, that enterprise is going to want to do that integration themselves with other services.
Absolutely. So it's not necessarily one tool to rule them all. Enterprises do want choice, and they might ultimately. Do you think they're looking for a solution to provide collab and calling from one vendor and one provider?
I think we're seeing. I don't know, really. I don't know how to answer that. I think there's definite people who do want one vendor if it's well integrated and it all works together. But then I think there's also the best-in-class approach, and we're seeing a lot of people use Zoom as best-in-class for video calling and integrating that into their solution, baking that into their service. So there is an argument: do you need to build everything? Do you need to integrate it? And I think if you're building everything, you've got to be building something that looks like best in class. And I don't think everyone who's doing that might be actually building that kind of service.